Let's dive right into this explainer and honestly try to demystify the sheer chaos of the 2020s. We're going to reveal how our world is transitioning away from the perceived stability we used to know into a highly calculated, intensely competitive new era. We'll be looking closely at a wealth of recent data and forecasts to understand exactly what is driving global power today.
But before we really get going, here is our roadmap for today. We'll be covering wars and global disruptions, the new economic reality, technology as global power, India's strategic tech rise, and finally, forecasting the 2030 world.
Section 1. Wars and Global Disruptions, the Physical Shocks Shaping Our Decade.
To really make sense of these physical shocks, we need a whole new vocabulary. The absolutely crucial concept to grasp here is structured rivalry. According to the Strategy International Foresight Report, this is the signature condition of the coming decade. You see, we aren't just looking at random disorder anymore. We're looking at a system where competition is intentionally embedded right into our institutions, our markets, and our tech ecosystems. Stability just isn't the default. It literally has to be constantly produced and defended. Think about globalization for a second. For decades, it relied on this old assumption that oceans and sea lanes were just neutral, price-driven trade routes, kind of like blank infrastructure. But the 2026 reality, it's starkly different. Maritime geography has returned as an instrument of power and coercion. We've basically moved from neutral oceans to heavily weaponized strategic corridors, where disruption is networked and, frankly, permanent. And we're seeing this play out with very real, specific military realities that have forced major alliances to completely recalibrate. For example, the Russian invasion of Ukraine fundamentally shifted defense postures, with the 2025 Hague NATO summit seeing members commit to defense spending targets of at least 5% of their GDP. Then, post-Gaza conflict dynamics prompted massive, localized maritime rerouting, turning everyday choke points into vital strategic nodes. Furthermore, forecasts are pointing to a 2026 Iran conflict that dramatically impacts global oil markets and security architectures around the Strait of Hormuz. So these aren't isolated incidents, right? They represent a sustained, systemic security competition. Moving on to Section 2, the new economic reality, the ripple effects of global friction. So, the economic fallout from all this geopolitical friction has been severe. Back in the early 2020s, we saw surging prices for critical resources like oil, natural gas, and fertilizer, which drove up inflation globally. Central banks were forced to respond by aggressively jacking up interest rates. And that tightening contributed directly to the 2023 global banking crisis. Remember the collapse or takeover of major institutions like Credit Suisse and several US banks? Because of all this, the global economic operating system shifted away from open, unbounded markets to a heavy focus on regionalization, supply chain reconfiguration, and strategic diversification. In fact, citing the World Economic Forum, the Bank of Ghana news brief shows how geoeconomic confrontation has officially emerged as the #1 risk threatening global markets for 2026. It outranks even extreme weather and interstate conflict. It just proves that economic tools like tariffs and sanctions are now the primary weapons of statecraft. Which brings us to Section 3, Technology as Global Power, the new geoeconomic security complex. Check out this investment shift captured in JP Morgan's 2025 EMEA exit report. It perfectly illustrates what we're talking about. Notice how back in 2020, fintech was the top driver for European, Middle Eastern, and African startup exits. But look at 2021 onwards. Artificial intelligence absolutely dominates the top spot year after year, right through the first half of 2025. Capital is flowing aggressively toward AI simply because it is the engine of the new global order. And governments are definitely treating these tech ecosystems as critical strategic infrastructure now. A prime example of this is the US-led Pax Silica initiative, which launched in December 2025. This initiative focuses squarely on securing trusted supply chains for semiconductors, AI infrastructure, and critical minerals. It completely blurs the line between economic competitiveness and national defense, proving that in 2026, technology policy literally is security policy. Looking ahead, the tech risks are frankly immense. The integration of AI introduces concepts like military AI cyber agents, or MECAs. We're talking about autonomous systems operating with limited human oversight that could dangerously amplify miscalculations. Combine that with AI-driven deepfake misinformation campaigns and the rapid rise of quantum computing threatening to completely break legacy encryption, and you have a highly volatile mix. We're now dealing with entirely unique actors on the global stage, and managing this is going to require robust, multi-stakeholder governance before these strategic disruptors trigger any unintended escalations. Section 4. India's Strategic Tech Rise, a 75-year journey to self-reliance.
97%. That is just a staggering number. According to reports celebrating India's Republic Day in 2026, 97% of mobile phones sold in India today are manufactured domestically. Just to put that into perspective, a little over a decade ago in 2014, India was importing 74% of its phones. This represents a massive, foundational leap toward true technological self-reliance.
This timeline really tracks that incredible manufacturing pivot. In 2014, absolutely zero iPhones were produced in India. By 2021, the government launched the comprehensive India Semiconductor Mission. Fast forward to 2024, and the country boasts over 300 manufacturing units. By 2025, India accounts for an impressive 15 to 20% of global iPhone production. They've completely transformed their industrial base to become a global powerhouse that tech giants now consider absolutely indispensable.
But, India's self-reliance isn't just about consumer electronics. It deeply extends into defense and space as well. In 2025, the high-technological precision strikes of Operation Sindoor clearly demonstrated how their space capabilities act as military force multipliers. This marked a definitive shift to a civil-military fused space program. Building on that, in 2026, the Indian Space Research Organization, or ISRO, is showcasing cutting-edge tech like quantum key distribution for secure communications and high-thrust electric propulsion systems. They are actively shaping the future of strategic tech. Finally, Section 5, Forecasting the 2030 World, Navigating Systemic Risk and Fragmentation.
The World Economic Forum is telling us that the risks approaching 2030 are deeply systemic. Geoeconomic confrontation leads the pack here, heavily outweighing traditional interstate conflict and societal or climate issues. The danger isn't just one big localized war anymore. The danger is cascading disruption, where a shock on a maritime choke point or a sudden tariff cascades into massive supply chain and market volatility worldwide. Forecasting reports indicate that our most likely baseline scenario for the coming years is an established, hardened age of competition. We are looking at a reality of bloc fragmentation and continuous geoeconomic warfare, where these newly formed regional economic blocs operate as incredibly powerful, unique actors on the global stage. Tariffs, export controls, industrial subsidies, and restrictions on strategic resources, they aren't just temporary emergency measures anymore. They are becoming the default operating system of the entire global economy. So, the biggest takeaway from this explainer is this: survival as we approach 2030 demands systemic resilience. It's no longer just about who has the biggest military or the largest economy. It's about who can navigate this structured rivalry, secure their technological supply chains, and manage fierce competition without triggering a total collapse. The ultimate question we have to ask ourselves as we look at this newly fragmented world is, are we truly ready for it?